Welcome back to Madame Tortuga's Lounge with your host, the neurodivergent, mentally ill, non-binary, polypan, pagan Pisces, Dottie the Psychic, a Metro Valley Pagan Pride affiliate. Hello, my dotlings, and welcome to another episode of Madame Tortuga's Lounge with
Robert L. Schreiwer.
Thank you for coming on today. I'm actually really super excited about this interview. I think the big reason I wanted to have you on here, actually there are several. I think it's kind of amazing some of the work you do. I remember hearing about, aren't you a part of one of the big city pagan prides?
I actually founded Philadelphia Pagan Pride Day. I've since passed it on to the next generation, but I remain on the board of directors.
And then also Heathens Against Hate.
I'm the senior manager of Heathens Against Hate. I inherited that. I inherited it back in 2013 after having been associated with for a while, but the other person who was leading it was retiring, and I inherited it then. And it's now, unfortunately, its need has risen even stronger more in the past few years. So now we are growing and beginning our activities more earnestly again.
I appreciate that. I would definitely because that's definitely something I want to deep dive into. But also, and this is kind of the big thing. I watched you give a speech, a pretty extensive speech. It was very interesting about that word I tried to say earlier that I couldn't pronounce.
Urglaawe.
So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about what that is and maybe where people can learn more.
Okay. Well, Urglaawe is a modern iteration of the ancient heathen religion through the lens of the Pennsylvania Dutch, the living Pennsylvania Dutch culture.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Before we get too far in, do you have any books or things like links that we can send people to?
So there's a total of 3 books. And the first one is, the oldest one of them is the... I lost my Google place here. Where do you go? There you are. Sorry. Is a dictionary of Urglaawe terminology, which is actually due for revision, but then I think the new book that's coming out soon will probably actually have a lot more updated information than that. But the second one is the first book of Urglaawe myths. And then the big one is Heathen Traditions of the Pennsylvania Dutch, an Urglaawe primer, which is being published by Llewellyn in January.
So that's a pretty hefty body of work.
Well, the first two are smaller and thinner, but they're full of info. But this new one is around 300 pages, and my co-authors Stacy Stewart and Michelle Jones. And I have been working on this thing for years, but it's finally at its final publication.
That's very, very cool. Okay, so before I interrupted you, tell us a little bit about
Urglaawe.
Yeah.
Urglaawe.
How do you pronounce that? Pronounce it slow for me.
All right. It's spelled capital Urglaawe. So it's a Pennsylvania Dutch word. If you take the word apart, the Ur means ancient or primal or original. And the English cognate of that word is the word yore, like Y-O-R-E. And like days of yore, long ago. And then Glaawe, Glaawe, is religion or faith. So it comes out meaning the original faith. And so Urglaawe is a modern iteration or modern expression of the ancient Germanic religion as seen through the lens of the living Pennsylvania Dutch culture.
That's very cool.
It's a neologism like that. That's a word that I coined when we first decided to give it a name. So
you're like, this is like, because I know when I listened to you speak before, you were talking about how you basically were number one, a part of the Pennsylvania Dutch community. Like, you knew the language in order to be able to gather the information. So this is pretty much like your baby.
Well, I mean, Pennsylvania Dutch is my ethnic group. Yes. And I am Pennsylvania Dutch. I'm very Pennsylvania Dutch, actually. And I teach Pennsylvania Dutch at a Bucks County Community College. We have four semesters a year. The language is very important to me, but it's not required that people know the language in order to be Urglaawe. But it is one of the movements that aims to keep the language and the culture alive, because that's where our religion comes from, primarily. And it's the language is close to my heart. And in order to do some of the interviews, especially with some of the more elderly folks who had survived the persecution or suppression eras between the wars, and especially during World War I, when being German was not a good thing in most American propaganda, a lot of these people are very suspicious of people, and so speaking the language was a foot in the door to get many of these people to actually be willing to meet me.
Can we talk a little bit about like the oppression that your community has faced?
Well, it's prior to World War I, there was a large buildup of anti-German hysteria throughout the United States. And the ironic thing is that, our ancestors left before Germany was a united country. When they left, it was still the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, or they came from, adjacent German regions, such as, some came from Austria and other places. But as Germany was, power, and once it became a nation state, and as its power increased, and it became a major player in world politics, and it was not. People could kind of tell a war was coming, and so they looked at their communities here, and not understanding that our ancestors were here since before the founding of this country, that most really had no sense of any connection to Germany anymore at all. We were still kind of identified as a fifth column, so to speak. And so there was a lot of attempts to break our culture up, because you could go from Philadelphia out to Pittsburgh and not have to speak English back in the early 1900s, and that made a lot of people worry. And so much the way that the Soviet Union it didn't directly oppress the peoples of Siberia, but what it did is try to make them look backward and stupid, so that their next generation wouldn't want to be a part of their own culture. And that happened here pretty strongly, especially with people who were born during the interwar period. That they would instead of learning, teaching their children the language, a lot of times they would use the language when they didn't want their children to understand what they were saying, and then it began to fall off. But it's been growing in the recent decades, in large part due to Amish birth rates. But more people speak Pennsylvania today than they did in 1980. So we're actually beginning to see a return to the language.
That's pretty cool. So you were talking about because I was like Pennsylvania Dutch. So they were here before like the Puritans, weren't they? Like, or are we talking at the same time?
There were some stragglers, I should actually say there's some leaders of some people who came from those regions and began exploring our settling parts of Pennsylvania before the major migration really began. And who is included in the Pennsylvania migration can kind of vary from person to person, or from scholar to scholar. But I pretty much take it as anybody who came from the certain Central European regions prior to the War of 1812. And so 1683 is when the major migration really began to Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York, and to New Orleans, but especially Philadelphia. And so that's when the migration is looked at as having begun. And that's what differentiates Pennsylvania Dutch from German American, is pretty much the break that happened during the War of 1812.
Okay, that's really interesting.
It's very complicated trying to explain a lot of stuff because there's all these we always measure time by wars, so you don't tend to seem to measure time by eras of peace.
Right.
The peace of 1945. Like we always, it seems to be World War I era, World War II era, or the interwar era. It is kind of, it's got sort of a statement on the human condition that we define our eras by wars many times.
Yeah, and tend to forget that in between there's a lot of other things going on.
Yes. Usually preparation for the next war.
Unfortunately. So what are like some of the core tenets of
Urglaawe?
Urglaawe? I will get this down.
You're getting there.
Urglaawe.
I tend to put the stress on the UR. That the first syllable is usually stressed. Urglaawe. So Urglaawe. The basic tenets are that we are polytheistic religions, and there's a lot of similarity to Asatru and other heathen denominations. We are a heathen denomination, but I will say we are a very inclusive heathen denomination, and a lot of that has to do with our ancestors. I will also state this: the Pennsylvania Dutch were the first ethnic group to arrive on these shores in large numbers, totally as refugees, and we were refugees from the wars and the economic upsets in Europe. We came here not as colonial power, but as people who needed to get out of Dodge real fast, and so that's one thing I think that makes our understandings a little bit different. Benjamin Franklin didn't like our ancestors. We weren't white enough for him. Then again, the Swedes weren't white enough for Benjamin Franklin either. In one of his treatises, he talks about how we can never adopt their language any more than we could their skin color and custom. So, yeah,
That was bold.
it was pretty bad. And the funny thing is, when you read what he wrote, and I'll get to a link at the end of this. When you read what he wrote, it sounds very similar to a lot of the anti-immigration rhetoric that we hear today. Especially the fact that people can't adapt to their new environment or don't have anything to add. There's a lot of bigotry involved there, and so we in many ways we weren't really white until after the Civil War, when they needed numbers to make up for the change in power status. I sidetracked myself there of the basic tenets.
Not white until the 60s.
Yeah, the 1860s. Now, in many places we work we are large numbers, but it really doesn't matter. It just shows that the whole concept of ethnicity and race was a problem from the very beginning, and not just related to the slaves of the South or to the Native Americans. But among our basic beliefs is that our deities would like us to be at the end of this cosmic day where they were at the beginning of it. And that means advancing human consciousness and human capabilities, and stretching our minds, asking questions, things like that. And unfortunately, with much of the world being adhering to religions that actually try to stifle the expansion of consciousness or our questioning, we're not 100% sure that we're really advancing as a race on this earth. But it's our duty to try to be the best people we can be, as hospitable as we can be, and to provide opportunities for people to learn and grow. So that's a basic tenet of it.
That's pretty interesting. So you say that this is a heathen faith. Let's talk a little bit about what that means. What does it mean to be a heathen denomination?
Okay. Well, this of course is a big topic for people across the pagan spectrum. It's like, well, what is heathen? What is pagan? And ultimately, in many ways, what it does is it boils down to the origin of the word. Essentially, heathen and pagan actually kind of mean the same thing. The religions of the countryside, the religion of the heath, or the religion of the paganus. I think I'm not quite as skilled in Romance word or origins, but so when the cities converted first, they led to the religion of the countryside being the old religion. So it was the heathen religion, or the religion of the heath. And so from my perspective, usually what I break it down to is that heathen religions tend to be from the Germanic speaking area, because the word heath comes from there, while many pagan old pagan religions originated from the Romance language areas, and then you had the Slavic and the Baltic religions to the east. And I tend to lump them under heathen as well, just because we don't really have a word like, they have Romova and Starevera from some of the Slavic languages, but so and pagan religions, I actually look at pagan as being the bit larger umbrella, and heathen is one denomination under them, and one group of religions under them, just like say the Hellenics would be another slot, and the various Reconstruction religions or newer New Age religions or whatever fall under different categories within pagan. So I just look at heathen as being originally related to primarily the Germanics and the Slavs, but that's just my own personal definition. But it's but the word heathen and heath and heide, they're all Germanic in origin. So I think that what comes from most people is that they think of heath, they think of religions that are either reconstructions or holdovers, or primarily reconstructions, or in our case, a new religion resulting from the organization of a lot of really old beliefs and practices that were scattered throughout our culture, and that's where Urglaawe comes from.
You know what? Actually, that brings me to an interesting. How, like, because I know. Didn't you say that you used to be a Mennonite?
Yeah, I grew up with my mother was primarily Lutheran, but I have both one foot in the plain culture, one foot in the fancy culture, and yeah, but I left the church after I decided that and recognized that I was hearing the call of multiple deities, and that a lot of things about Christianity didn't make sense. I still have a lot of respect for the people who adhere to, particularly Mennonism in a lot of ways, because a lot of them just are living their best life as well as they can be. Of course, you have political problems and social things across any religion anywhere. But I think many Mennonites actually, I think, try to be the best Christians they can be without necessarily stomping all over everybody else. But that's just my own personal experience.
That's a valid experience. I don't think a lot of people, I'm sure that the greater community has not had a lot of experience with the Mennonite or the Amish, which are totally different. I know that they're different.
The Amish spun off of the Mennonites, but I went to a Brethren school in the Church of the Brethren, and they're actually pretty non-condemning. Like, there are a lot of them are peace religions that just are trying to foster peace among people, and don't necessarily go out evangelizing. They just, again, try to be good examples. So there's a lot of, we tend to have a tendency, and I'm guilty of this too in many ways, because a lot of people have had really bad experiences with organized religion, particularly organized Christian religion. But that doesn't mean that everybody or every church or every even church body is necessarily the same, and then carries a lot of this baggage from the past. And so plus Mennonites really differ from the old order buggy driving to the more liberal and pacifist sects that are out there trying to make peace and prevent war. Kind of, some of them are very Quaker-like in a lot of ways. So it's, again, Mennonites are a large spectrum of churches.
That's actually kind of funny that you mentioned the Quaker. I have a friend who is I don't know exactly, he's a Quaker, but he's like a new new Quaker. I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but basically, because it's
one of the a friend, I guess, or one of the friends, Society of Friends.
Yeah, I think so. I think he Mothman Ministries. Actually, folks, if you're watching, that was probably the episode you saw before this, or maybe a couple episodes before. It may take me a while to get this out because I'm getting people lined up is I'm off track. Sorry, but yeah, but he's Ollie from Mothman Ministries. They do a lot of mutual aid, and he's a Quaker.
Yeah,
he likes his hat.
So, is he from Virginia?
No, he's from West Virginia.
Uh-huh.
I think the way he kind of found his faith was, us internet pagans. I'm not judging how people come across their material, but he really, really, if we get a chance to watch the episode, it was really good. But he is a trans man, and he really, really appreciated how Quakers, even because what we think of conservative is not what conservation is. The conservative Quakers were the more open-minded, progressive at the time, like they were abolitionists. So he was really drawn to that. And I guess there's been a new wave of Quakers kind of reemerging.
Well, I mean, there are still Quakers who dress a lot like Mennonites down in Virginia, but but one thing I will mention is that the Quakers in Pennsylvania did not really. The first protest against slavery actually took place from German Quakers and German Mennonites who had settled in Germantown in 1688, and the Quaker body here in Pennsylvania, the English Quakers, it took them a while to actually go around to condemn slavery themselves. So and for those German immigrants who actually did that protest, it's hard for us to really understand today just how big of a deal that was. It was the first time that there was any protest against slavery in the New World or anywhere in the British Empire, and that meant that they were criticizing the crown, and that was a big deal at the time. They were putting themselves at pretty large risk, and it got forgotten about for a long time. But the abolitionist movement did discover it again, prior to the Civil War. But it after down in Germantown and Philadelphia, there is those memorial plaques to historical plaques there commemorating it. And I do think it's important because, again, we arrived as refugees, so many were indentured servants who couldn't afford their fare and ended up being essential slavery for periods of 20 years, but that's nothing compared to your entire lifetime. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned from history, and unfortunately history is one subject that seems to be expendable in many schools. So
well, when you're trying to control the future, it's easier to control the past.
Yeah, indeed.
That's a whole conversation to have there, but this is a great segue into Heathens Against Hate. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, Heathens Against Hate has been around since I can remember, but I became formally involved in, I guess, in sometime in 2011 or something, and it was just one other guy and I, but he retired at some point, I guess maybe 2013 or 2014, and I took it over, and it's a big opportunity in a lot of ways, but it's also one of the problems that we have generally as a society is that everybody has their own sets of beliefs, and trying to bring together a whole bunch of people with very different beliefs, but who have like one or two similar stands is great, because we're against the establishment of hate, and we're the hate rhetoric that comes out of particularly the far right extreme, but then they don't agree on anything else. And so there's a lot of infighting among the people that you're trying to bring together to voice stuff. So we, unfortunately, for a long time that we had to kind of shut down the Heathen Against Hate Facebook group because we couldn't maintain it. It was just too explosive. But we've presented at the Parliament of the World's Religions twice on this subject, and because for starters, as I'm sure you and many of your viewers know, heathenry in general does have a problem with racism and various bigotries, and we have that affects us too, because people sometimes look at us directly and think, oh, they're heathen, so they have to be, neo-Nazis or homophobes, transphobes, which is,
it almost feels like the punk movement. It's kind of like a reflection of the punk movement, because like if you think about it, the old punk rockers were anti-establishment. They wore like the Sex Pistols. You had all these bands that were just very much against a lot of the same things that we're against now, and they kind of got infiltrated. Infiltrated and associated, and I know that there was some bootlicking back in the 60s, 80s, something like that, from like the Odinists, or I can't even remember.
Yeah, I mean that a lot of that stuff. The Odinists are a whole different animal. I mean, they are technically heathen, but they're so monotheistic or theistic, where they may recognize the existence of other deities, but they focus only on one. And the the term Odinism was actually created by a literal Danish Nazi, Elsa Christensen, and she. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole with that, but she had founded prison ministries that helped to spread Odinism in U.S. prisons, and I think Canadian too, because she was in Canada. But back years ago in 2011, I established In-Reach Heathen Prison Services, which went into prisons to try to provide the correct material to, or better, like more positive material to inmates who were kind of concerned. It started out with me getting a letter from a member of the Troth who was in a prison saying, the only information I'm getting here is David Lane's materials are being passed to us by Aryan Brotherhood people who aren't even heathen. And so we started that program. That's a program within the Troth even today. So it's that's a living program, and under its current leader, Sarah Axtell, I think it'll probably grow, because she's been doing a lot of her own great work in the prisons for many years now. So.
You know what? It's funny because we actually had I love an episode where I get to reference other people that have been on, because we have Appalachen Pagan Ministries.
Oh yeah. Donna and I have worked together. Like we've at least shared information, collaborated before. She does excellent work, and and she doesn't put up with anybody's bullshit.
Yeah, I know, that's why I love her. She came on the podcast because they wouldn't let her in the Christmas parade.
Yeah, I remember that incident too. Yeah, and but she definitely is a formidable adversary for people who try to do the wrong things, and I have a lot of admiration for her and her work.
Same. And I think of heathens in prison. That's the first person I think of. I've actually I've had a couple of clients reach out to me from prison, which I thought was odd, but I sent them to the Appalachen Pagan Ministry. What was the other, you said a word that started with a T.
Oh, the Troth. That's the largest international heathen organization, the oldest. I was the president of the Troth from, I was on the board of directors from 2011 to 2022, and I was the president from 2016 to 2022. So it's the word the and then Troth, Troth.
Okay, the Troth.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me, were they the ones who did the shield wall?
I'm not sure. It's possible that I don't think we did anything like that officially, at least not during my term. But the Troth is a major publisher of heathen materials, and boy, we're about to spin out into like 3 different circles here. But years ago, I'm also the manager of a group called Heathens Heathen Hof. I'm not the original founder of that one, but I am the current manager of the online portion. The prior the actual founder was named Zan Fulmer, and the group of people within Heathens Heathen Hof back in 2016 came together and wrote up Declaration 127, which refers to Havamal 127 about when you see evil, call it what it is. And that was kind of a cornerstone document of inclusive heathenry. And I'll send you the links to that later. After Zan retired from Heathens Heathen Hof, I ended up inheriting the control over Declaration 127. In 2021, we updated it to version 2.0, which essentially says that we will not do business with anybody who is, exclusionary or holds these racist or bigoted views against people, because it besmirches us, our deities, and also degrades humanity in general. In 2024, I gave control of Declaration 127 to the Troth, because they're a larger organization, and I maintain some privileges and rights to it, but and I am still on the Troth board of directors as an advisor. But the Declaration 127 and Heathens Against Hate during this Pagan Pride season, every Pagan Pride Day that Heathens Against Hate is going to have us giving a talk about Declaration 127 and about what Heathens Against Hate is doing. So if anybody happens to be,
Speaking of pagan prides,
yeah,
September 27th, Valley Park and Hurricane will be Metro Valley's pagan pride. That's broom, not vroom. if you want to come, you're more than welcome to. We need speakers.
Well, unfortunately, on September 28th, I will be at Greater Chicagoland's Pagan Pride Day in Chicago, which I shouldn't say unfortunately, because that's actually a nice event that takes place every other year. And on September 27th, other colleagues of mine will be at South Jersey Pagan Pride Day in Cherry Hill. And so some of us will be giving a talk on Heathens Against Hate on Saturday, and the rest of some of us on Sunday. This weekend, Wilkes-Barre is Northeastern Pennsylvania Pagan Pride Day in Wilkes-Barre. We'll be at this on August 9th? Yeah, whatever this coming Saturday is.
It's probably going to be October before I get this episode out.
October 4th, we're York Pagan Pride Day in York, Pennsylvania. We'll be at that one. And we'll be at Philadelphia's. We'll be at several Pagan Pride Days, I think 5 of them this year. So, and it is important. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said, that's really cool. You're an amazing well of information. Go ahead and say what you were going to say.
The Pagan Pride Day, and I've started kind of flirting with working more with the Pagan Pride Project, because it really is, and those are important days, and I think we need to really recognize that while they are at their heart harvest festivals, and people tend to go for the vendors more than anything, the workshops and the presentations really are extremely important, especially things like Heathens Against Hate, which really, while it may be heathen, it affects all pagans. And we, and many at protests recently, because we actually have been going to a lot of protests this year. We've organized a few ourselves. Protests or rallies have been supported also by the local pagan community as well, because we are all, no matter how different our religions are, we are all at risk of being victims of the same
getting burned at the same stake.
Yeah, well, exactly. Pretty much the way you worded it was pretty was much more succinct. But
that's why I've been telling everyone, like, I don't care. We're all going to burn at the same stake.
And anybody who thinks that they can cozy up to evangelicals and somehow we are all at risk. And there's a lot more of us if we just don't look at our separate religions and recognize that what we have in common really does matter. Our numbers increase drastically. And And because again, you said, would you say that's broom, not room, or something? Well,
Vroom, not vroom, because when we're here in West Virginia, if you look up pagans in West Virginia, you're going to get like maybe a couple of Discord groups, and you're going to get a whole lot of articles of the biker gang.
oh yeah, yeah.
So it went broom, not vroom.
Uh,
And that's the name of our event because we wanted to separate it from the organization, Metro Valley Pagan Pride, because we're trying to do more than just an event. We like one of my friends in it is working on putting together a book of poetry so we can eventually do like a scholarship program, which, you know, it may be $25 for those entrance fees and things like that, but when you need that money, you know, especially if we're going to school or emergency funds for people, things like that. I'm not exactly sure how she wants to structure that, so because that's her project, but that's one thing. I'm working on a documentary of pagans in West Virginia. So like that's what Metro Valley Pagan Pride is about. But it's like the host of Broom Not Vroom. That's our flagship event. That's our Pagan Pride Day.
it's funny that you should say that though, because you know, one year when I dropped off the cat food donations to it's the beneficiary of Philadelphia Pagan Pride Day, the person who was receiving it said to me, "Oh," was asking me about the event, what it was called, and I said, "You know, Philadelphia Pagan Pride." Said, "Oh, well, I'd love to ride the back of your bike someday." And I'm like, it took me a second. And I'm like, and I'm like, about the best you'd probably get would be a scooter, but you know, it'd be but the and then something dawned on me. I'm like, no, not that pagan. So
Wrong pagan.
but it took me a while. But but with all these events and everything that's going on, I mean, I am not going into any closet at this point in my life, you know, and broom or otherwise, and it's just really. It's time for us to really begin to network better and be, you know, and be more solid. It's difficult because we're all pursuing our own religions and our own mindsets, our own things, but we got to watch our backs and watch each other's backs because it does matter. And we actually have seen our communities rise when there have been like threats to some pagan establishments, or and it has actually made a difference already. So we just got to keep up the drive.
You said the Pagan Pride Project, because I know when we first started up Pagan Pride down here, we tried to get involved in the National Pagan Pride something or other and never got an email back.
Well, that's the sort of thing that's being worked on at the national level now. And it's an all volunteer system. And during the era of COVID, it got particularly struck, and so it has had its issues. And I really can't speak for them because I don't officially represent them, but there are people who are working hard on straightening up that ship because it is very important. And everybody, even if there have been occasional drops and things, everybody's dedicated to the concept of strengthening this community. You know, it's a big project. It's a big deal, and during, like, again, COVID hit it hard, and so and left some people who don't have all the skills, not knowing how to fix things or not knowing what to do, and so it's
right.
I want to see that succeed, if for no other reason than the fact that every one of these Pagan Pride iterations is really important to to our visibility, our success, and our ability to network with one another. Because, you know, at least like now I know there is one in your town. So if we have something going on out there, we can actually hit you guys up and say, hey, you know, such and such is having a problem, or, you know, is there anybody who can check out this information? Things really do matter.
Right. Trying to get people interested. It's like herding cats.
Most people I think most people are interested in protecting and advancing the community, but they just don't know how. And again, because you said it's like herding cats, it's not so much a matter of interest, but it's a matter of actual time and
direction.
And sometimes mobility challenges or economic challenges that kind of prevent people from being able to do everything that they could do if they actually had the access to it. And yeah, like during the bigger protests here, we had people who were outside of Philadelphia or who were at home and could not, attend the rallies or the protests in person. They were there listening to police scanners and reporting to us what the police were doing, so we could be prepared for anything that might go wrong. It actually went very well, but everybody was able to help regardless of their location or their ability to move around. There's a role for everybody in all this. And like, I never thought that at age 59 I would be, quote, a revolutionary, end quote. And the worst thing is that the revolution we're fighting for is one that my ancestors and forebears fought for hundreds of years ago. And it's just but
As of West Virginia, I definitely feel that, because we've definitely, like, we're all dragging up the old memories of Blair Mountain around here.
Yeah, and it's sad on the one hand, but we got to do it. This is what the Gen X and later, it's our call, and we need to actually get up and save the principles of our country from being destroyed. And if the principles of our country are destroyed, these hard fought, applications of our liberties for our religions, for our gender identities, for our simple freedoms, for our orientations, for even just for being women or men, like, all that stuff could easily go back to to earlier iterations of our republic, and a lot of people will find themselves disenfranchised or worse. So it does matter.
I agree, absolutely. And I think that's a big catalyst for really, like, all the work that either one of us is doing. I know it is amazing to talk to somebody who's part of a big city pagan pride, because down here we're holding it together with shoestring and bubble gum. But just getting the name out there that people, like, hey, there is a community to rally around. I was telling people when we first started, and a lot of people, like, every pagan in the valley thinks they're the only pagan in the valley.
Yeah.
There's a real deep sense of isolation.
And at the end of this, I'll be asking you to send me the information about your pagan pride, because I'll push that out within our communities and see if we can try to get the numbers up, because there are people of Urglaawe persuasion in West Virginia, and there are other pagans. West Virginia has a significant Dutch population, so it's which is really funny, by the way, because when they speak English, they have the dialect, our accents similar to yours. But when they speak Pennsylvania Dutch, they sound just like they came from Lancaster County. It's kind of funny, but it's I actually really like West Virginia. It's a beautiful state, and it's had a hard ride in a lot of ways, just like Pennsylvania has, because of the industrial crashes in this country. But it's there's a lot that could really be, a lot of magic can really be gleaned from that state, and so send me the information. We'll see if we can at least get some more attention there, and maybe next year we could actually participate. But
I would love that. And I tell you, I really touched my heart when you say these things about my state, because I love West Virginia. I don't understand the people running it, not one bit, but I love my state so much. It is one of the most beautiful. I'm sorry, I'm going to sit here and brag about West Virginia because this is my home. But yeah, absolutely. I'll gladly send you stuff. And people watching, of course, remember to like, share, and subscribe. There are going to be a whole lot of links in the down below. But I want to come up with a fancy name for the down below, like the roots of Yggdrasil. That is my description box for this video.
So it's kind of like the well of weird, but that would be a great term for it. It's I'm actually kind of digging the loving on West Virginia here. I mean, because again, there is so much like folklore and folk energy, right? And when I say folk in this case, I mean like of the people, not of a specific, but that West Virginia has. I've done interviews with people who practice Braucherei or Hexerei out there, and it's pretty. It was pretty deep. Like there were people who were like pretty much steeped in. And let me see. So hold on. I might even have to be able to grab something here. This book.
Oh, that's cool.
Science, Cures, and Witchery. Came from West Virginia. Interviews, not by me, but by this guy, and they had a video that went with it too. And
I think I saw that video because it was older footage. Like they had dug and dug to find some of that.
These people are all pretty old.
Right. I know talked about like the water witches and
I can't remember what there. It was some of the film quality was actually pretty bad. Like it was like they had like water trickling in the background when this woman was talking, and it just gave it a very outhouse feel. But but
that is a little bit of West Virginia. We're holding together on spikes here sometimes.
But this one, it's definitely interesting. So I have a lot of admiration for the West Virginia retention of old ways that are still being applied today in many places, and a lot of people aren't even necessarily realizing they're doing it, and which means it's that integrated, and I think that's really cool.
That is cool. So when you stood up, we could actually see the picture in the background. I'll probably cut in a little clip here. Oh, yeah, there you go. Tell us a little bit about what's going on. This looks beautiful. What's going on here?
Okay, what that is that's from this past Saturday. That's our Hoyt Fest, our haymaking festival altar, and the buggy there is decorated because it's holding the image of the goddess Erda, and as she bakes her rounds, which unlike the stories of the goddess Nerthus from Tacitus's Germania, there are no slaves who tend to the image of the goddess who have to be killed at the end, but nobody has to die in a bog in the end. But
it's a definite improvement.
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh, have had volunteers in the past, but it was all of course humorous. But yeah. So the buggy is decorated, and there's an image of the goddess in there, and it's celebrating the harvest, the haymaking, and the bounty of the land. So you look a little perplexed by the whole Germania thing there. In Tacitus's Germania, he described the ancient Germans as having the goddess Nerthus, who would go around in this what's the word he used? I can't remember. It was wagon, or and the image was supposed to be so sacred that nobody could touch it or anything other than these slaves who were designated to take care of it. And at the end of it, because they were not allowed to reveal certain things, they would be bogged at the end of it. But we don't do that. No human sacrifice. Despite what many evangelicals will say about all pagan religions, we all know that human sacrifices and baby sacrifices only happen on designated days across all pagan religions.
I know they're still stuck on the cat. So I never did it.
Yeah, I never did it.
Never happened. A whole list of things that never happened. And you know what? It's funny because I have seen because I watch a lot of atheistic content, just like people watching the evangelicals, and I try not to watch it directly because the power of the eye. I do not want to give them my energy directly. But if somebody wants to go and watch them, it's important that we are paying attention to what they're saying. And I have noticed there's a whole lot more mentioning of pagans and heathens, and I don't think they mean it in the way that we mean it.
No, especially heathens, because they tend to, when they say heathens, they tend to be saying
not Christian.
Yeah, anybody not Christian, or anybody not Judeo-Christian, because the term heathen, it was in the Old Testament as well, but particularly not Christian these days. And that is something I've described before. Like there is like a lowercase h versus a capital H in heathen. And for us, the capital H refers to us today. And the only reason it's appearing in that like that is because English is a Germanic language, and so it's using a Germanic word to describe the people who weren't Christian. But it's one of the reasons that there also are starting to take notice of us more because our numbers have increased over the years, and because of visibility events like Pagan Pride Days, and I remember, I don't think it was one of the, I think it might have been one of the ones that we ran partially. At one of the protests, we actually had described in front of, we talked to people. We were at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where, of course, the Declaration of Independence was signed. But, and we were talking about our religions being, dealing with these racist problems. A lot of people had never heard of our religion before. About the closest thing that they had to exposure to it was Thor from the Marvel comics, and but it does make a difference. It really helps a lot when we were able to talk to people and get them familiar with who we are and who we're not. Yeah, that rhymed.
You know what? Sorry, my phone went off.
That's all right.
But it is something you're correct. I do think that is something I have also noticed. And again, it's funny because when I was first starting to pick up this project, because I had also inherited my project. We started out as Charleston area Pagan Pride, and it was just an event that was held by a guy, and his name was Colin. And he also got criticism for calling it Pagan Pride. We got criticism for calling it Pagan Pride because, like, if you're calling it Pride, you're asking for a fight. And I have a lot of older people who are like, we do not need to be represented. We don't want people to know we're here. And it's not. It's funny because I can definitely see like being part of both communities, because I'm also part of the Pride community. I'm a bisexual, a non-binary person. So like I can see the reflections, like sometimes the oppression, it's hitting some of the same notes.
Yeah.
And I see some of the same responses to those notes being hit. I don't know where I was going with that thought, but
I also am part of, I'm gay, so it's, I recognize a lot of that same thing, but this might be where one of the advantages of granted, I didn't grow up around Philly, I grew up around Reading, but it's Philadelphia, being closer to a larger city is helpful in a lot of ways, because there's already there's been a large pride movement in Philadelphia, and lots of things have been happening even before Stonewall in Philly. So Philadelphia has a little bit of that spirit of rallying and advancing those who have been marginalized for a much longer period of time. So, but out in the country, I can understand especially further in the country, there's a lot of fear because the establishment is so much stronger there and tends to be a little bit more radicalized, and then I can understand why people might want to
keep their head down,
or like be able to select at which opportunities they would put their head up. It's hard sometimes for people to understand. Well, if everybody just got up and did something, it's not always that easy. So,
yeah.
But a lot of times, if people can do what they can do, again, like they may not be able to go in their own streets and rally without having putting themselves or their family or their at their job at risk, but they can provide information and insight and stuff to other people who might be in a better position to be able to do that stuff without having their lives destroyed. So there are ways that people can help even from a disadvantaged point. And right. It's all still kind of coming together because, like I said, I've never really considered myself a revolutionary,
Right. I
Yeah.
certainly didn't. I was more than happy to just screw up my own life.
Uh, But I mean, I grew up. I'll be honest. I grew up pretty comfortable, and even being, even being gay, and it's just I was pretty comfortable for most of my life. But now, what's happening is that there's a lot of people that I care about who are at risk now ahead of me because, it's the alt right and the more oppressive kinds of personalities tend to target other groups first, and we need to all stand together before this happens so that we're all together as it continues. And that's one of the things that HAH is trying to get across.
I get that 100% because I'm a non-binary person. I am close to the trans community in this area, and I personally know people, more than one, who have fled. They've literally fled the state out of some of them pretty severe, at least one case that was pretty severe persecution. There's been a lot of them that left because of the need for opportunity.
Yeah.
Which is something that's always been ongoing in West Virginia. Our three major exports are coal, our educated youth, and poverty porn. So there's only so much you can do for opportunity. But
Right.
especially people who are not, who are gender nonconforming, who don't pass, it can be very difficult for people like that to find a job in this area. So a lot of them have had to leave. And we actually I talked about this on this channel before, but we actually had a shop and it was in Logan. This is kind of one of those places that was a lot of dumb things happened all at once, but we did have a shop that got ran out, a pagan shop that got ran out.
That's horrible. And we've had attempts of that in Pennsylvania, one of which made enough news to kind of get to feel stronger, to be in a position to be able to retain its location and its business. But that stuff shouldn't even be happening. We don't go in large numbers and stand next to a Christian gift shop and harass them, and
Right.
And most of those Christians aren't doing it either. Right? I mean, we got to be fair there.
And that's another thing. This is the thing that blew my mind. I think more than anything else. This is one of those things that makes me question reality just a smidge, because we kind of think of oppression as being a constant thing, but it's not. It is moments of things, because we had protesters at our first Metro Valley Pagan Pride. We had protesters at the first Charleston area Pagan Pride, but we haven't had protests. We didn't have protesters at the Pagan Prides in between.
Yeah.
We didn't have there's plenty of other community events in the pagan community that, wow. Apparently I definitely can't speak Pennsylvania Dutch, but I'm not sure I can speak English either. Yeah.
At Philadelphia, we had our local Westboro Baptist Church knockoff come to ours a few years, and the one year we were very well prepared. We just had these huge speakers and just played Rick Astley music and danced in the streets right in front of them, and we had a blast, and they never came back again. And it's a lot of it is how the community reacts, and if we allow them to. In 2018, they caught us off guard, and because it was the first time they showed up, and they were they had their loud megaphones and everything. But once we got prepared, it turned out to be kind of fun. As a matter of fact, I wanted to add them into the entertainment part of our program.
Oh my God! You know what I said? This is the best advertising I never paid for.
Yeah, and So, a lot of it is the way we react. The first year they caught us off guard and they got to us, but then eventually we just had fun and they turned into a dance party for us. And that was, that's the better way to react. Rather, we can't fight with them or argue with them because they're not there to resolve things. They're only there to disrupt things. And,
Right.
And you can't, so you just can't let them get away with it.
I will never understand. I don't think they understand what they are like arguing for or against, or like
They
Like
thought we
you're-
were gay pride, by the way, at first. When they got there, they didn't discover that we were actually, pagans and heathens until actually they were there already. But because they came with a whole bunch of anti-gay kinds of.
like they just recycle it.
And I was just like, then I saw them when they realized that I saw them putting them away. And I was like, hey, you don't have to put them away. That's all crossover, but
Like
But
we
yeah.
got plenty of those people here too.
exactly. I mean, but it's kind of sad when you're showing up to something to protest and you don't even know what you're protesting. I don't know. It's there, and ultimately, and just investigating the people who led that thing and realizing just what dirty people they were, like all sorts of fraud things, our own histories, and it's like you people sure have a lot of nerve advancing this righteousness, your form of righteousness, not our form of righteousness, while also breaking every commandment
Right? Like
of your own religion, including the golden rule. So I mean, it's
like they cannot conceive of their main guy being a radical humanist.
yeah. Well,
They can't like. I can't get my head far enough up my ass to follow. Anyway, it's what do you say? Like every time I have this conversation, I too am very not all Christians, and it does give very not all men, but like also not all Christians. I know plenty of really, really good ones. Like a big chunk of my family is Catholic.
yeah. The people who are more worried about what everybody else is doing than about being the best people they can be, that's where you got a problem. And it's the people who say you can't do that because it's against my religion, they're the problem. It's one thing to not do it because it's against your own religion, but when you start telling me what I can and can't do because of your religion, then we got a problem. But I don't think we're going to solve that problem today.
No, it is very, you can't eat ice cream because I'm lactose intolerant.
Yeah. Although at the 1 year when they were protesting us, there was an Amish guy because there was a market along the street, a farmer's market, and I remember their main preacher yelling out, "Hey, Amish guy with the ice cream, you're going to hell!" So like the Amish weren't religious enough for him. So it's like
that's a whole moment.
he was literally it was that one caught that one almost made everybody laugh. But the funny thing is that chances are that Amish guy would be able to get along with us much better than with that kind of person because again, the Amish aren't particularly evangelical. They try to be, who they are, live for their community values and their community, but they don't go around telling everybody else that they're going to hell. So generally, there are some radical Amish groups, but
there's radical everybody out there.
yeah, except for radical humanitarians. We need radical humanitarians.
I do love me some radical humanists. I love the humanists, the atheists that are like, you know what, we're going to be good because being good is its own reward. I'm like, okay, you know what, I can appreciate that.
Yeah, and the funny thing is with some pagan religions, including Urglaawe, actually, one doesn't actually have to believe in the gods to still be a part of the community because the community is what matters the most.
Right.
So It's
You
the
know what?
practice, not the belief.
Oh, go ahead. Know what you were saying. The action's not the belief.
It's the praxis. They're more than the beliefs. Like, when we're all together, we just do the same things. If somebody doesn't believe in the deities, we're not there to enforce thought. Thought is, you have your sovereignty of self, and that is a very important aspect.
That's something I've noticed. Like I was telling, like pagan dominant rarely means pagan exclusive, because if it's a generic pagan, then there's always like my one or two Christian witches hanging around, the one or two like Christ-like folk that still like they're big into the mystical aspects of being more Christ-like. And I always find them very interesting, because it's such a unique path that you have to they almost inevitably have to find that on their own.
Right.
But unless you're doing like a distinct ritual for a specific group, there's always these kind of outlying Christ-like people. I can't necessarily call them Christian, because some of them don't call themselves Christian, or they'll call themselves Christian witches, but they all have a deep love for the mysticism of Christianity.
Yeah, and so like some people, at some points in history, those people were called heretics and were excommunicated or worse. So
they're nailed to the same stake.
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, I don't think we'll solve those problems today, but we do all know that these are problems for our communities and for our community when you bring us all together under the same concept. And this is one of the things I would like for Heathens Against Hate to really be pursuing, is that a network of more people from different areas, all with the same mind that we got to protect our community, that's made up of these smaller communities of different people of different backgrounds, but we all share the same challenges. We all share the same risks. And like you said, there's the same stake is waiting for all of us. So that's where I'm hoping that what'll come out of these pagan pride days and stuff will be to have people whom we trust and whom we know will be in it for the same general reasons in these communities, to serve as contact people to try to build the network, outside of just, right where we are. And I pretty much already know that's going to go well this coming weekend in Wilkes-Barre. And I pretty much trust all of the people who are running the Pagan Pride Day events, because they're already prepared for it. You already know that the possibility of you being pursued or harassed or something exists, and so you usually have some sort of preparation in mind for what you're going to do if somebody shows up, or there are things like this that anybody who organizes these events has to take into consideration. And so I tend to look at the local coordinators and the organizers of these events as being potential contact points for Heathens Against Hate, and then that build the network from there.
Definitely. Like we are interested. I would love to bring this up to the council. It's funny. We're talking about Heathens Against Hate. My ex-girlfriend, when Charles Snagger Pride, the guy who was running that, Hill Traveler, Colin, he was definitely a follower of the Morgan. He had a way of starting a fight. But he, when he passed away and I took over, my ex-girlfriend told me, it's like, you've got to get the Heathens to do security.
Well, and there's, maybe. I mean, although really, I got to tell you, the security does matter. Now there was one year we hired a security guard, and there's really only so much she could do, though. It really matters was just not letting them get what they wanted, which they wanted to get under our skin, and we just didn't let that happen, and that's why they didn't come back. So, but times are getting tenser, so.
They are. So, okay, so if you had one piece of advice to give to somebody who is trying to build their local community, what would that be?
Oh boy, that's a rough one. Let's see. Okay, the way I started was by meetup. I started by meetup. I had in different locations within the metropolitan area here. I had would have I would just go to a restaurant and just announce I was going to be there, have a meetup, and then eventually somebody finally came, and then somebody else came, and then that's what it started burgeoning. Now, granted, Facebook works a lot in a lot of ways now too, but also getting involved in the local. What's that?
Said Facebook is so sporadic.
Facebook is, but you see, the thing is that for our community, we've actually been talking about this. Like, if the electromagnetic pulse comes, like we have to start getting some more of our stuff into physical form now, because so many of us are using the computer for a lot of communications and theorizing and philosophizing and stuff. It's not getting printed, and we could lose a lot because it's on the computers. But to finish the original thought is actually get involved in whatever pagan things you can, and get to be known and start to find common people with common backgrounds, because I'm pretty sure almost every state has some sort of presence on Facebook or Discord with some sort of pagan kind of thing, and that's one way to start. But for me, the way I started literally was just by sitting sometimes by myself in a restaurant, but I was there every month. And the meetup that I started in November of 2007 is still monthly here now, so it's been running that entire time.
That's pretty amazing.
And so it sometimes the numbers go higher or lower depending on if we have to move it to a different day, because it used to be the third Thursday, but then we had to move it to the second Wednesday because I had to teach Pennsylvania Dutch on Thursday nights or whatever. But so it comes and goes, but consistency, or at least a constant presence, is also something that helps to grow community. But being inclusive and recognizing that not everybody's going to agree with everything you say or do. You got to allow room for people to be individuals, as long as they're not being destructive or insulting or degrading along the way. But most of us, I think, that's a big statement, but most of us, I think, are in it for the right reasons. We just may not always have the same ideas of how to get there. And I actually this is the optimist in me, but I actually believe that most humans are just trying to live their life and doing the best that they can, and what is right is they're trying to do the right thing, but what everybody considers to be right isn't necessarily the same thing. And because I don't think most people don't really want to go and cause trouble for other people. They just want to live their lives and have enough money to be able to make ends meet and to be able to go places and see things and do things. And that's what I think most people want. And it's all the other crap that, when we're pitted against each other by political leaders and by religious leaders and stuff, that's where I think things really begin to fall apart. And unfortunately, our political leaders have become really good at doing that lately.
Yeah, definitely.
And by lately, I mean the last 200 years. But
you know what? To be fair, I guess that would be lately, considering y'all were here so long ago.
Yeah, but I don't know.
If you don't mind, because I know we've been talking for about an hour, but I don't think we've really hour and a half. I don't think we've really actually talked much about the structure of hold on a second, let me see if I get it. I know the first part's yep.
Urglaawe. There you go, Urglaawe. The structure of Urglaawe is that's a good question, actually, because we are orthopractic. I mean, like everybody can believe what they want to believe and practice in their own way within their own home, but there are certain markers that identify it as Urglaawe. So we do retain like some kind of like identification that has to be maintained, because we don't want to say, for instance, we don't want people suddenly bringing Native American spirits into our religion and calling it Urglaawe or appropriating from other cultures. But if somebody wants to honor a Native American spirit or deity in their home, that's up to them. We don't police that, but so we just have some things that we say, you can do whatever you want, but just don't call it Urglaawe unless it's something that actually is part of our of our lore or something. And there are a few kindreds and freeholds about. The largest one is Distelfink Sippschaft here in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. That's pretty much the organization of it.
Well, I mean, tell us. I know there's like hex marks. Because I wanted to talk a little bit about why people use hex instead of curse sometimes, because I know that was something I've seen a lot of the internet do. Like, let's take a little break here, because this is something I want to talk about, and I think I'm going to split the episode here, because we've talked a lot about the social aspect, the working with community, and I want to talk more about, I want to get more into the hex marks and the
this is
Braucherei and Hexerei.
Yeah, and because to that question that you just brought up was actually something I think you might have stepped out already. That was one of the I think you were there for that. Was one of the things I actually did talk about, is using the word hex, which comes from Pennsylvania Dutch, in its actual meaning, not meaning to curse. So and that's one of the things we brought up at Black Forest Clan's event. So
all right, let's take a little break, even if it's just just a couple minutes, so that I can take this point and kind of bust the episode up.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for coming. We're definitely going to have a part 2. We're going to start probably talking here in a minute, but you're probably going to hear this next episode, because I know that this is something that it could definitely run over time, we'll say. So thank you very much for listening. Definitely check out all the links below. I definitely personally am going to be looking more into Heathens Against Hatred. Heathens Against Hate. Okay, got it right. If you want to learn more about Robert, you can check out his books. We'll try to have links below. And you said that your next book is coming out in January?
January, yep.
From Llewellyn Press. As ever, you can learn more about me at DOTTIE thepsychic.com. Safe travel and much profit to you. Thank you for joining me at Madame Tortuga's Lounge. In case you didn't know, I am actually a full-time professional psychic with another YouTube channel. I'm also a part of Metro Valley Pagan Pride, and if you'd like to learn about all of those things, you can find out more at DOTTIE thepsychic.com. That's DottieThePsychic.com. Safe travel and much profit to you.